Today, our guest is survivor leader and advocate Rebekah Hope. We will be talking with Rebekah about long-term care services needed for survivors of human trafficking and what reintegration and recovery can be for survivors and what services are needed to help in this process. We will also be talking about survivor advocacy and awareness. Join us today with Rebekah Hope. Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Rebekah Hope. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing so well, and it's so great to see you. And just so everyone knows out there, you and I are friends, and we've known each other for some time.
Yes.
So this just is a good welcome home to both of us to see each other again and hear each other's voices. So, Rebekah, share with our listeners the parts of your story and your healing journey you're comfortable sharing.
Yes, indeed. So during my life, I faced several adversities. And here are some challenges that I would like to share. I was a victim of early trauma. I was sexually abused as a young child. As a result, by my parents' divorce, I was exposed to a lifestyle I could not comprehend, compounding a lot of pain and confusion. In my earlier years, most abuse remained a secret, as in most cases, this happens. It is essential to recognize the gravity of childhood sexual trauma and provide support, therapy, resources, and survivors of all ages. Healing is possible, but it requires compassion, understanding, and professional help with us. My teenage struggles were I had a hard time fitting in. I felt as I was different from other kids. I had a lot of addictions at this time. I couldn't share any of the horrific things that my father did to me. So when I hit the 7th grade, I was asked to join a gang, and that was in the Crips. And that was the first time I was repeatedly gang raped in. So I got the first train pulled on me. After that, beside my trauma, I followed a man and I went to California with him. And that was the first time I ever saw a man get murdered in front of me. This is when my drug addiction spiraled out of control. And after my drug addiction had happened and I was really into the drugs, I became a runaway several times away from my mom's house. And it led me to get to my sister's house, which is near Atlanta. And when we got to Atlanta, I faced undesirable advances from her husband. And that's when I started dealing drugs with them. And I found myself in the grasp of another man, and his name was Bo. I faced unwanted physical and emotional experiences with him that led me into a darker place. I saw several men doing things to me all the time. I was bought every single day for about 6 months. It was about 8 months that he groomed me. After that, I finally learned that I was more of a better person and that I was going to get out of the darkness of that, which was human trafficking. My journey is of survival and resilience. So I don't like to look at myself as a victim. I am a survivor of it. I endured a lot of trauma in my life. I felt that having to share my courageous story is what sheds lights of the darker corners of human experience, emphasizing the importance of empathy and support for all human trafficking survivors. That's kind of where I've been with my life. I kind of just stick to that and just know that my resilience is one of the biggest things that I can look at, and to share my story into depth doesn't really give much of the viewers to see. So it's like, I feel that knowing that I've gone through trauma and knowing that my story has a very big impact, I do just kind of keep it to myself in most cases now. So, but I have dealt with a lot, and I have learned that in trauma and where I've been and all the things that I've had to endure in this life, it has not made me who I am.
Yeah.
It has made me who I am is what I meant to say. I just know that with all the men that I've encountered, they all had one thing in common. And I've just learned that taking care of my kids and going to school and focusing on self-care and getting myself back into the right mindset and just learning that I am enough. And that's all that matters. And so sharing my story with other survivors and making sure that our voices are very well known, it might help the next generation of minor sex trafficking. And that's where I want to go in my doctorate degree. So.
Yeah, absolutely, Rebekah. I'm so proud of you. A couple things. One is so people understand that human trafficking happens even in our rural states and our rural areas. So you mentioned that you went to California and you went to Atlanta, but your story starts in Montana.
Yes, it does.
In Billings, which is one of the largest towns, but also within one of the smaller towns. And so it helps for people to understand, especially in rural states, that this happens in rural communities too.
Yes. The gang started in Billings.
Yeah.
So when I was talking about my story a long time ago, I didn't really piece a lot of it together because I wasn't quite healed. So now looking back, I'm going, wow, it didn't even just start in Atlanta. I mean, my story started when I was 5. So I learned that, my dad used me as a sexual tool to be able to bring in more men, and I was molested by all his friends. And I didn't realize that he was getting paid for it and that he was an actual pimp. So I just know that a lot of victims of sexual assault, it starts at a young age.
Yeah.
And most women have to endure the pain of trauma from either their dad or their grandpa or, their uncle or their brother. It doesn't matter. Sexual trauma, being sex trafficked, human trafficked, or whatever, can start at any age and anywhere. It could be in the home, on the street. It could be just, it's out there. So, I mean, it could be with the gorilla pimp, or it could be with, being boyfriended in. And in my life, I had to endure all of it. So it was my father, it was the gang, it was Bo. I mean, it was just, that's how my life led into it. And then knowing that by the time that I was 19 and was pregnant with my second child, I realized that I wanted to be a mother and I needed to change. And yes, I did meet a great man at that time, and he did become my husband, and we did have, a great relationship up until, the last bit of part of it. But I just realized that, it doesn't matter what trauma you have. Everybody has trauma, but sexual trauma is definitely, it starts at a young age for most women. And that's what I've kind of encountered being here out on the reservation, is a lot of these women that have been out here have been sexual trauma from their uncle, which has led them into being, exposed to a bigger thing, which is, the drug world, into sex trafficking, into being actually pimped out by your pimp.
Yeah. Yeah, when you have drugs, you're going to have a whole lot of other crimes that come with it.
Yes.
And most often, one of those crimes is going to be sexual violence of some kind.
Yes.
I agreed with you and nodded my head and said, yes, when you said what happened to you, paraphrasing here, is not what made you the person that you are. And I agreed with you. And then you kind of rephrased that.
Yes.
But I will share with you what I was agreeing to, because I've known you for some time now. What I was agreeing to was that exact statement, because the bad things that have happened to you, but they were never who you were, and they're not who you are.
You're right. That's probably why I said that. And I was like, wait, does that sound right coming out of my mouth that I'm feeling in my heart? But then I was like, no, because I still feel like our experiences and like what we've gone through is a part of us.
Absolutely.
Even if it's not who I am.
Right.
The one thing that my therapist said to me, because I think therapists need to have therapists, so as a soon to be therapist, she's my mentor. I love her to death. Lisa, she always says, Rebekah, I've never had a patient that is so resilient as you are. And I just looked at her and I was like, the resilience has been inside of me since the age of 5.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't even allow the trauma that happened with my own father and what he did to me. And it was so intense that I was like, I'm not going to allow him to make me feel like I am less than a person. And I kept going with that. And there's some times that I was defeated where I didn't even want to be in this world. And there are still moments in my own mind because of my trauma. And, I don't think that we ever actually really truly get over it, but I know that we endure it.
Yeah.
And we know that we can be that person that is going to be very successful in our own mind. And so just having the resilience of it and just knowing that I can empower myself is one of the things that has gotten me through this life.
Absolutely. You are an incredibly self-aware human being. And I credit you for that. And that was really what I was thinking of, is what you have done to create the life you've wanted and to be this adult woman that you are, and going after your goals and your dreams You created that. You've overcome and created and just have done extraordinary things with your life. One of those things, and you kind of touched on it and want to move in that direction, is some of what you're doing right now with your going to school. But you are a well-spoken advocate for trafficking survivors to have access to comprehensive victim-centered long-term care services.
Yes.
What are some of the significant physical and psychological health challenges survivors experience, and what long-term care services do you want to see funded and available for survivors?
Oh, my heart is here. I had to write it all out. I was like, oh, Rebekah, you have so many thoughts, but I just know that the physical health challenges that these women go through is just phenomenal. I mean, people really have to just think about it. I've been around so many different victims of it, survivors coming out of it. And it's like, wow, what they had to go through, just like me, what I had to go through. The issue of supporting trafficking survivors is so important, and it requires an undivided attention. The individuals, despite the resilience, often confront numerous physical and psychological health challenges. We have to look at the traumatic experiences that they went through. So therefore, we must examine these challenges in a greater detail and explore the various long-term and care services for them that can help them be meaningful difference in their lives. Because it's not about us. And that's the one thing that I keep telling everybody. You want to help out these trafficking survivors. It's not about you. It's about their mental health and where they're at and their thoughts and their process and what they're going through. And a lot of people don't see that. They want it to be about them. And they're like, well, I'm helping this person out. Well, you can't look at it like that. So if you're going to do it, you got to really physically be there for them and emotionally be there for them. But the physical health challenges that they face, I mean, they could have STDs, HIV. You got to make sure that they get medical attention. These are just things that they go through. I mean, you could have a survivor that comes through and she's pregnant with her trafficker or a John, and that I've had and I've seen it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do with the baby? And how are you going to handle this? And this is another phase. And a lot of them abort them. And it just breaks my heart, because it's like, I understand why they have to, and it's pro-choice, but it breaks my heart because it's like, I know how that feels because I had to go through it too. So it's like, okay, but with all of the health issues, they can go for infertility, malnutrition, they can have, substance abuse. They have bruises, scars all over physically, emotionally, mentally. I mean, it happens through their body, depression, feeling helpless, shame, humiliation is a big thing with it. A lot of people are very humiliated about their emotional trauma responses and how it's so persistent in your brain because of having lots of disorientation. I mean, the torture that these women go through, it's just so hard on them that they can't even get to the other side. And when their family looks at them, they look at them differently. You got to have a really big support team behind them. Long-term care needed would be finding safe havens. We need more of them out there. They need to get funded. I don't care who wants to put it on. We need more. I mean, you can't just have 2 in the state of Montana or 3 or 4. I mean, there just needs to be more. There needs to be more help for these women. They're all over the place. We have one of the biggest highways that go through here. They're always going through and like stopping in Missoula. I mean, here in Polson, it's crazy. We got one highway that goes straight out to Canada that I see so many. And I'm like, I can't do anything for them except get them to the right help if they come and ask. But I mean, I make sure that I'm out there and I'm always like talking and doing the things that I need to do, as helping in the establishing of the mental capacity where they can call me, where I can not just physically help them because that's hard right now in my situation, but mentally and emotionally, I can help them and get them to the other side of really talking about their story, understanding where they're at, and allowing them to come up with their own ideas and making sure that they feel like I can be that powerful woman that I need to be. Another thing is, I think that trauma-informed psychological intervention needs to happen. I think that it needs to be addressed both on sexual abuse, stable health, and providing social support. So we need more mental health care professionals out there learning about what trauma response is in a sexual trauma victim. So if that's at the age of 5 to the age of 40, we need more. So that is a big thing for long care, services. Federal services, we need more access to having more legal services for them. I know that you guys are doing great in Billings, but we need it in Missoula. We need it out here in Polson. It is so phenomenal. I worked at Safe Harbor, and it's a domestic violence shelter. I had so many sex trafficking victims come through. And the thing is that I couldn't do anything. I was just an intern. And then I went into meetings, and it was like they were, pardon my language, just dumb. And so it was like, can I educate out here on the reservation? It's so hard when it's just one person. You got to have more people to back that up, to put on something out here. I mean, I know missing Indigenous people is a really big thing out here. They do a lot of things and a lot of outreaches on that, but that's all intertwined with human trafficking.
Exactly. Yeah.
It is. It's a huge thing. And it's like, I see it and I'm like, wow, you guys do not realize that this is all within their home.
Right.
So it's really heartbreaking out here. I think that to connect survivors with residential programs tailored to their needs, we really need to find more things for these survivors to feel like they are needed in our community and not just looked at because of the fact of what they went through. And we have a lot of men, businessmen, I'm not just picking on businessmen, all men and women, they all have a sexual desire. We all are sexual beings. This is just a part of our nature. But we need to I can't even say the word.
Differentiate.
Thank you. I'm like, why can't I say the word? So we just do. We need to learn that they can't be victims of it, and people need to be more aware of what they're doing to other people. And that's a people thing. This isn't a city problem. It's a people problem, right?
Yeah.
So this is what we've been saying for years. It's not about the city. It's about the people. So I don't know. I mean, we're going to be living in the day and age for all people to be kind of their own emotional, sexual trauma. And it's just predators out there. We got sick people. We got healthy people, So I just think that having more of a connection with residential programs and making sure that people are aware of what they're doing and bringing down the predators that need to be brought down is the biggest thing in my eyes. It's enhancing the vital services that we can provide for survivors with the necessary resources for healing and restoration. So I feel like that's a big thing in my life that I'm trying to get going. I want to do one day a ranch that's like long term, but my short term, because I am getting my degree and I'll have it by the time I'm a couple years from now.
So exciting. So, Rebekah, you are a straight A student.
Yep.
You've already gotten your undergraduate degree. You're a straight A student getting your master's degree.
Yes.
And then when you're done with your master's degree, you have plans to go on to get a doctorate degree and do this work full time. I can't think of a better person doing it. You brought up a couple of really good points that I wanted to kind of emphasize and talk a little bit about. And you are right now where you live is on one of the reservations in Montana. And like so many other tribal areas that we see within our country on these forced reservation settings, it's poverty. The poverty is so extreme. And when we have poverty, whether it's a rural area, an urban area, a tribal area, that's where criminal enterprises and criminal actors know that the levels of stress are going to be high.
Yes.
And so they know they've got a good chance to get some people that want to escape that level of stress that they're facing in that poverty situation.
Yes.
And they'll get on alcohol or drugs. And those criminal actors will be right there to really fund that addiction. And they will fund that through free drugs, free alcohol. And we see it all the time in rural states, like what we see in urban areas. And this is the way that they gain control over moms and dads who, in other sets of circumstances, would never sell their child. But the drugs have completely consumed their family and, unfortunately, sometimes generations of families. And these are the things we see repeated over and over and over again. And it's gut-wrenching, it's heartbreaking, and yet you and I both know extraordinary women who are trying to break those generational things that have been happening in their families.
Yes.
And we're watching these extraordinary women rise up. And the reason I'm focusing a little bit on women right there is because when we talk about poverty and what we know within sex trafficking is that 90+% of the victims are female.
Yes.
So it's not just poverty.
No.
If it were just poverty, then men would be victims too.
Yes.
But it's the sexual objectification of females that has been normalized far too long in our country.
Yes.
And it's this idea that men have power over female bodies.
Yes.
And one of the things that you and I have talked about before is the fact that when it's sex trafficking, it is not about sex.
No.
It's about power, control, taking someone's freedom away from them.
Yeah.
It's rarely ever about sex because it's never sex. In human trafficking, it's always rape.
Yes.
There's never consent there. So it's always rape.
Yes.
So it's always about that power and that control. And one of the things you do so beautifully when you share your story and you talk with survivors and you help educate audiences is helping people to understand that it's not just the physical things that have to be overcome. It's not just the emotional and mental things that have to be overcome by a survivor, but something very key, it's trust.
Yes.
Because people in authority that have what we all believe are supposed to be protecting us, helping us, caring for us, have been the buyers.
Yes.
And so that victim, and this leads us into that next question. As I ask you this next question, I want you to think of it from that survivor point of view and put our audience in that survivor point of view as well on what reintegration and recovery for survivors. Those are things that are not often talked about. What does this process look like, feel like for survivors? And what basic or specialized services do survivors need to rebuild their lives and rebuild trust in humanity?
Huh. Okay, that kind of made me a little teary-eyed because you brought up police officers or even law enforcement. And I'll tell a little part of that in this. It took me forever to trust Brandon or any officer in that matter. So,
and I'll just say, whom we love very much is FBI Special Agent Brandon Walter, whom we love very much. So yes. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. I was like, when you said it, I was like, oh my gosh, he was the first FBI agent that I ever encountered. Besides, I didn't know that when I encountered Nicolette, she's the other FBI agent that I encountered at the Montana Fair. And she came up, she's like, I'm FBI, here's my number. What? Anyways, but when I actually did and talked with Brandon, it was like heart-wrenching. My heart raced. I mean, to build trust with an FBI agent because of what happened to me. So when I was in trafficking, my trafficker, Bo, he sold me to an officer of the law, and I will never forget it. It was horrific. He was the worst John I had ever had through the whole process. And I'm telling you, I was trained to be the best person I could be in it, like where I had to go and like what I had to do to these men, and always making sure that I was not getting totally abused in the worst possible way because I wanted to have respect in the best way. I know that sounds really kind of weird, but it's not. When you're in it, you got to do what you have to do to be able to survive it. And the one thing that I didn't think I was going to survive was that night with that officer. And when he had bought me, he did the most horrific things. And one thing that I stand by is having gun rights, but I hate guns. I just can't stand to be around him still. I mean, he made me do sexual things with his gun, and he sat there and masturbated to it. One of the biggest things in my life that I've had to learn to come back and say, not everybody is that, he was a monster. He wasn't even human. And he's still a police officer. And so it breaks my heart. What else has he done? My trafficker is still trafficking women. He's got enough money out there that he gets put away. He gets right out in after 2 years. He's still doing whatever he's doing with the FBI, or not the FBI, but with the police officers down in Atlanta. It's just a sick, twisted way of how human trafficking can be. And it involves everybody. It doesn't just involve the blue collar man. It doesn't just involve the gang man. It doesn't just involve the scum on the side of the road or a John that just needs a fix because his wife isn't having sex with him. It involves officers of the law. It involves lawyers. It involves everybody. Anybody can be that way. And so individuals who have experienced slavery and human trafficking often encounter distinctive obstacles on their journey. And towards that, reintegration and recovery is a big thing. Various stages of this process is crucial. Services that can assist survivors in reconstructing their lives. The reintegration process, how do I explain it? The practical implication stage, survivors can receive assistance once they return home. So having them have that process of coming back home and knowing if they've been purchased by an officer, the trust into even having to go into that with an officer, because how do you get trafficked by an officer or get bought by an officer and then have to go to the law and try to get your trafficker? Because what if you are a minor and your family's going, we want to bring justice to this? Well, did you ever wonder what she actually has gone through? Are we actually really internalizing what that survivor has gone through? Have you asked her? I mean, it's really hard to ask a survivor, what have you gone through? That's why I feel like getting a therapist involved, getting somebody that they trust involved, finding a mentor, researching about other survivors, having them build a relationship and have that connection with other people is so important. That especially like if they've gone through it and they need to be able to talk about it, but they don't trust anybody, to be able to find that person that they can trust, because trust is the biggest factor in all of it. And a lot of these women will see that and they won't find it in society. So guess where they go back to?
Yeah. What they know.
Their pimp.
What they know.
What they know.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it might not be the same pimp. They might find another man. They might start selling themselves because that's what they feel that they have to do, because that's all they know.
Mm-hmm.
So I've met a lot of those kind of women too, where it could have happened at an earlier age and they get out of it and going back home and they're like, nobody understands that process of regurgitation. They just don't get it. They don't understand where they're mental and what they need as being healed. And so it's really paramount for people to actually learn and understand and really do their research on what to do on helping a survivor of human trafficking. So the proper way is to have a comprehensive process that goes beyond just providing legal assistance, because you can't just jump right into it. Yes, you can, but I feel as a person, it would be very hard for them to jump right into legal services. So they really need to rebuild their social, their political, and their economic relationships. They need to understand where they are in society before they can go forward and actually do that. Because all you're doing when you put a survivor in front of their trafficker and it's only been a couple of weeks, you're literally putting her back into trauma-enforced mentality. So she literally, even if you guys get the perpetrator and they go for years, it does not help her mind. It does not help her mentally, physically, emotionally, nothing. She is back to being who she was before. And if she doesn't get that process, then it's not going to help her. So her environment, where she's going, her reconnecting with her former community, her family, whoever, it really has to be a very sensitive, holistic approach. It is so crucial for achieving these successes in long-term rehabilitation.
Yeah.
So I feel like they need to just learn how to rebuild their lives.
Yeah.
Before they can actually start trusting in the law enforcement. And that's just coming from a survivor standpoint. I know that we want to get the perpetrators off. I know that we want to get the pimps away. I know that Johns need to be put away if they've been a part of it or whatever. But to really help rehabilitate these women, we have to do it in a sensitive, holistic manner and make sure that they are being supported all the way around.
Yeah, the wholeness effect of the whole being.
Yes.
You had mentioned law enforcement, but there's so many other types of individuals that are out there buying. And one of the things that we see as well are those that come out of the church.
Yes.
So then you have the whole spiritual aspect of that.
Agreed.
And now you're, again, adding on those layers of trauma.
And God is going to help.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you just did the air quotes. You and I could talk about that for a very long time. And we have. I love what you're saying, Rebekah, because we can't hammer home enough. It is professional, medical,
yes,
mental health,
yes,
professional science, mental health,
yes,
professional care,
yes,
medical, all around comprehensive medical care.
Yes,
that's really required. Yes, if that survivor or that victim wants spiritual help, Let them ask for it.
Exactly. And don't put pressure on it.
Don't put pressure on them. Exactly. Don't bring God into that mix, because they've probably been violently offended by a pastor or a youth pastor. And so that area of healing needs to come at the time that the victim and the survivor is ready for that.
Yes.
Chooses that.
Yes.
And then they need to be able to choose their own path for that.
Yes.
And the path that they want to go on and go down. And we hope that they do whatever path they choose, but it does need to be that victim and survivor's choice.
Exactly. Because you don't know where they came from. You don't know what diversity they are.
Right.
They could be, Native American, and what their holistic way of healing is completely different from a Christian way of living. So it's like, okay, well, you can't just put on Christianity and say God's going to heal you, because I've heard it multiple times. Anyways.
Couldn't agree with you more. And Rebekah, the first time that you shared your story, I was very honored to watch you. And if you remember all of those young people in that room, it was an Up With People cast, all of those folks that came up and surrounded you, those young people, 18 to 24-year-olds who wanted to share their story with you. Remember that?
Oh my gosh, that was years ago.
And that's something that every survivor, I think, when they share their story, experiences, are the people that come up to say, thank you. I want to tell you my story. And it's that power of story. I know that you believe in the power of sharing your story. How does the survivor's story impact the fight against human trafficking?
Oh, the survivor story impacting. So remembering the path of recovery is not a straight line or a cycle. So when you're providing continuous support and empathy for these survivors, they find healing and empowerment to it, right? So when we feel that as a survivor, we want to go out and increase the awareness and empathy. Okay, so we want to be able to be that survivor for them. So when we're being accounted for in our experiences as humans and what we have faced in our issues, there's this empathy and compassion that makes it more fulfilling to be able to know what we can do for other people. I remember the cast of Up With People, and I remember one individual, and it broke my heart. We have still stayed in contact. Bless him. He was the first man that I actually was encountered with that had been sex trafficked. And he was telling me his story, and I was like, I wasn't as educated as I am now, but I was educated from my street smarts and what I, went through as a survivor. But I was like, oh my gosh. And so when I was telling him the other day about how, soon I'm going to be able to help you, because he's like, are you done yet? Are you done yet? Can you be my counselor now? There's so much telehealth. And I'm like, not yet. But I was like, I don't need to be paid for it. I can totally mentor you. So we've been doing, therapy sessions in that sense of mentorship, because I can.
Right.
And so he's been such a phenomenal piece to just even how I've pieced together so many different things. And he started sharing his story. So that impacted my life. And it all started from back then. And it all started from him still wanting to be an advocate for human trafficking. And that's when it started, because he didn't know about it until he heard. And he was like, that happened to me. And it's like, oh my gosh, like the process is so phenomenal and so empowering. And it's like, you just want to be able to just hug everybody and say, you can do this when they've gone through what you've gone through. So when survivors are there, the advocacy and everything that goes with it to protect and preventing human trafficking, the voices of survivor play a critical role in shaping legislation and also identifying areas where existing systems fall short. By listening to their experience and the insights, policymakers, law enforcement, and the NGOs can develop more effective anti-trafficking strategies to be able to help and prioritize victims' protection. So it's really about protecting them, but also helping them and knowing that they're being listened by other people and that they are making a difference in people's lives. Because that's the biggest thing, as I wouldn't want to go out there and share my story, which I have, and I have been through a lot of different dynamics, and a lot of people have either loved it or they've criticize me, or they've tried to heal me in the wrong way.
Right.
And it's like, I've gotten all these different dynamics. And, every time I talk to a survivor, I always say, keep that shield up.
Yeah.
Make sure you do not let that down. I know you want to feel like you can trust, but do not do it yet. You have to learn the person, and you have to be able to understand them before you trust them. They might come across as people that want to help you, but ultimately they might just want something different. And so I really have to emphasize that to a lot of my, my mentorships and people that I've talked to, because it is so crazy on how one diamond in the little rough and what they want to do to you, and how much it has impacted my life and what has happened through different stages of this, journey that I've been on with doing advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't ever hold anything against anybody. I love everybody, but it's been a hard one. And I will say that. So I kind of keep to myself on a lot of areas unless I'm helping. Survivors who share their journeys of healing and recovery can be a source of inspiration for others. Their stories of resilience can encourage victims to seek the help and support the needs. Communities, organizations, and individuals often rally around survivors, and we know this. Often resources, counseling, and rehabilitation aids their recovery. So they need help in there. People need to be able to open up and be able to go into the recovery parts, volunteer, be able to help in every which way, because our story is going to impact it. It might not stop human trafficking, but at least it will bring someone else out, and that one survivor will survive it. So I always believe at least one can be, helped in that matter. Law enforcement, healthcare, social services professionals can significantly benefit from survivors who speak their story. Learning about red flags, trauma-informed care, and victim-centered approaches can substantially enhance the understanding of victimization through us sharing our story. By incorporating survivors' experience in training programs, frontline workers can be equipped with the necessary tools to identify and assist victims efficiently. This ultimately leads to a safer and more empowered community for all. In the summary of survivor stories, amplify the urgency of combating human trafficking. They can remind us that behind statistics and policies are real lives, and collectively effort must prioritize their well-being and injustice. So I feel like having justice behind it all, and having the support from everybody, survivors can stand up from all over. And I think that it would impact a huge big thing if we could do that and help them.
Absolutely. So well said, Rebekah. And one of the things that we were talking about just earlier today, I had shared with you that I had just come from one of our quarterly task force meetings that we just had this morning. And one of the things we shared was how survivors have changed the way that we use language, and that law enforcement no longer, rephrase that. Trauma-informed, victim-centered law enforcement.
I love that.
No longer interrogates victims. They interview.
I love that.
They interview. We changed the way, and one of our other FBI heroes, Michelle Stewart, one of the most extraordinary victim specialists in our country. Phenomenal.
Yes, she is.
She gets called out for all of the really big, horrific things that happen in our country. And we are privileged enough to know her and work with her.
Yes.
Her ability to manifest and interview and bring compassion and comfort into that setting. And one of the things I was sharing today, that I've been very vocal about this in my work on the task force and my work in this area, is that I want to start to see, one of the changes in law enforcement is the word cooperation to be upon the law enforcement, not the victim.
Yes.
That when you're interviewing a witness or you're interviewing a victim, cooperation is not that person's responsibility. Cooperation is the responsibility of law enforcement to understand the setting in which this victim has survived.
Yes.
And that this victim is sitting there giving information, desperately trying to remember and answer the questions. But the responsibility for cooperation is on law enforcement. It is not and never upon a victim of sexual violence in any way, shape, or form.
I love that. And I love Michelle. Oh my gosh, I miss her.
Oh,
I know.
Oh, she's extraordinary.
So amazing. I love her.
Yeah, you and I are both in the FBI groupie fan camp,
Yeah.
but we are. We admit it. We
Yes,
are.
we are. It's
So,
good. I love them
yeah,
all.
I do too. So, Rebekah, on this show, we always tell our listeners ways that they can help combat human trafficking in their communities. What are 2 to 3 things that people can do in their lives or their communities right now, this week, tomorrow? What are some of those things they can do?
Oh my gosh, what are the things that they can do? Start attending task force, find a task force, learning about it, understanding the cues and what, is going on out there. Education. I always say education on everything. It's like going through school, I didn't realize how much of the things that I've learned, and I'm just so thankful for it. And so I still go out there just to even learn something else, because we're learning something new every day. So if you don't know what human trafficking is, educate yourself about it. Start joining the community and learning how to combat and fight what we need to fight. If you want to give to local charity, that's always going to be the biggest thing. If there's somebody that is legitimately helping these survivors, give to them. They need it. I know, just even for myself, when I have had, the past things that I've had, helping with the things that I've done. I mean, it really does go a long way, especially for a survivor. So other things I would say would be join a task force. I already said that, I think, but
Say it again. I'm good with you saying it again.
I feel like join the task force. Know what's going on in your community, especially in Billings. I mean, Billings is getting so big, and I wish we had more things out this way. And it's like Missoula does have a task force. They do good things, and I'm not saying that they don't. It's just I wish more people were aware and having the educational purposes, even calling places around here and trying to set up stuff. It's like people just shut you down, and it's like they don't want to know what's out there. So I'm saying educate yourself if you don't want to do the outreaches or boots on the ground kind of stuff. So I would just really, really, really join the task force.
And our task force, and we welcome people from all over the state and all over the country. You and I are talking in Montana, but our task force works on a national level and we work on a statewide level. And we have partners and individuals that belong from all over the country because that's where we work. And our task force goes throughout the state of Montana, and we train also. I just did some training not long ago in Arizona, and we go all around and train. And especially when we're working on online issues, that's everywhere.
Exactly.
That is everywhere and pervasive everywhere.
And you guys do Zoom.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Anytime someone wants to learn something, if they have a smart device, they can get on and they can Google to learn about human trafficking through the Blue Campaign, the Department of Health and Human Services Blue Campaign.
Exactly.
Through our task force, which is Yellowstone Human Trafficking Task Force. We'll share in just a moment what our website is, but there's so many places out there to learn and to become educated. There's no reason why someone can't take it upon themselves to learn.
Exactly.
That's what we encourage as well. And education is key to ending this crime. And it's not just about education on how to reduce the vulnerability, because it's not the single responsibility for any human being to reduce their vulnerability to having a crime done on them.
Exactly.
The responsibility is the perpetrator and the criminal actor. It's their responsibility.
Exactly.
Anyway, I just so love you. I love you so
too.
much, Rebekah. And it's so great to see you. And, and people are listening to us, but I just have to share, you are an amazing mama.
Oh.
And so your kids are all inside your house, and you went into your car. You went into your car to have a private moment and private conversation. So I've been so thrilled to see you sitting in your car when we're having this conversation. It's so typical. Such a good mama you are.
There's no other way, right?
Yeah. You are having that little private moment while your older kids are watching younger kids.
Yes.
Yeah, you are. And you look as beautiful as ever, Rebekah.
Thank
you do. I'm so proud of you.
Please.
You are truly this extraordinary story, and it's all you. You are the hero in your story. You are the
Yes.
shero in your story.
Yes.
You have had some shitty people in your life.
Yes.
The good thing is that you have learned how to trust and find and draw in some really wonderful people that have believed in you and have helped you along the way. You and I are big believers in education. So
Yes.
watching you, one, be a straight A student, but also love that passion for learning that you've got. You are a true story for other young girls or boys, members of the LGBTQ community out there, non-binary, all the folks out there that have been experiencing hardships from their childhood on.
Yes.
Who feel like they're alone, that they're unique, that no one would understand. You are an extraordinary story for them that they can identify with. Your presence, your being, who you are, shaping yourself to be, because you're controlling your own life and you are shaping the life and developing and designing the life that you want. And let's not make no bones about this. It has not been easy.
No.
You have had many tragedies along the way. You have had many setbacks along the way, and you continue to overcome, and you continue to say, no, the life I want is the one I'm going to have. And you took control of your life.
Yes.
And not only have you taken control of your life, but you are helping other people, just like you shared, you are helping other people gain control of their life as well.
Yes.
I am so proud of you, Rebekah Hope. I am.
Thank you.
You are forever one of my sheroes. I adore you and love you dearly. And you have always picked up the phone whenever I've called to say, I want to have a talk. Will you come share your story with us? Will you come present? And you never fail to deliver on such an impactful way. And you just did again. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. And I can't wait for everyone who will be listening to the podcast to hear your story and the extraordinary valuable information that you have provided in letting us know the directions that we all need to be moving in to improve our legislation when it comes to victim services. There's not a single state that is a champion in this area, and every single state, including our federal government, needs to become much more of a champion in this area and kick up some resources, because it should not be the entire burden on nonprofit organizations. And one of the shout outs that I would give is, if you live in a community that has a YWCA, they're always in need of funding. They're always in need of help, of volunteers. YWCAs throughout our country have really taken on the service providing of victims of domestic violence and victims of human trafficking and sexual violence, which are all related. And I don't care where you're at. If there's a YWCA in your area, there's a good place to give to. They're doing good work out there. Well, Rebekah, thank you again for your voice, for being our guest today.
Thank you.
For the important work you are doing. And we will have links to topics discussed today on our task force website at yhttf.org. Again, that's yhttf.org. To all of our listeners, thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing this journey with us. Join us next week when our guest will be Jan Edwards from Paving the Way. If you suspect labor or sex trafficking in the state of Montana, please call 833-406-7867. If you are being trafficked and need help, please call 911. If you suspect labor or sex trafficking outside of the state of Montana, please call your regional FBI office. You may also call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888.